Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into some, well, fascinating and definitely at times challenging information coming out of India. We're really zeroing in on two critical areas, the integrity of its electoral process and the everyday realities of its policing system. For this deep dive, we've pulled together some recent reports, news excerpts, and notably, this big one. The Status of Policing in India Report 2025, or SPR 2025. He gives a pretty unprecedented look into police perceptions, on the ground. Our mission here is to pull out the most important insights, maybe unearth some surprising facts, and really help you understand the core issues at play without hopefully getting too bogged down. You should walk away with a truly well-informed perspective on these really pivotal aspects of Indian democracy.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, I think, as we connect the dots, is how these topics that seem quite separate, election rules and police behavior, they actually come together. They both seem to highlight the central theme, the really delicate balance of institutional trust and accountability, especially in a democracy. We'll be navigating that space sort of between the political claims, the realities on the ground, and, importantly, the perceptions of those who hold power.
Right. So we're going to kick things off with a major political claim that's been making waves in India. This is Rahul Gandhi's allegation of institutionalized cherry, which translates to theft, basically, in the revision of electoral rolls. Now, this isn't just a simple accusation, is it? It seems to point towards something more systemic.
Exactly. And when you look at the details, this revision process, it affects a huge number of voters, nearly 80 million. And there's a particular focus on Bihar, which is a crucial state electorally. The process itself, it involved quite strict documentation requirements.
Yeah.
And critics are, well, they're quick to point out that documents like birth certificates or passports, they can be incredibly difficult for certain vulnerable groups to get hold of. We're talking especially minorities, like Muslims. So there are these serious concerns about potential exclusion.
And there's that key detail, too, isn't there, about the Aadhaar card?
Yes, exactly. Aadhaar, which is India's, widely used national biometric ID, it's explicitly not listed as acceptable proof for this specific revision, which does make you ask, well, why leave out a document that so many people actually have?
Meanwhile, the ruling party, the BJP, they support the revision. They argue it's necessary, updating new voters, removing people who've passed away or moved, standard stuff. But here's where it gets quite a bit more complex. They also claim it's essential to weed out undocumented Muslim immigrants. And this isn't exactly a new line of argument, is it? It kind of echoes those concerns from 2019 with that citizenship list in Assam.
That's right, the National Register of Citizens, the NRC in Assam. It left nearly 2 million people, a lot of them Muslims, facing the risk of statelessness. So this current claim taps into those existing fears.
And the seriousness of these current claims, well, it wasn't lost on the public. It actually led to significant protests right in New Delhi, which resulted in Rahul Gandhi and other opposition lawmakers being detained.
And Gandhi himself, he framed it very starkly. He said, "This fight is not political, but for saving the Constitution." That phrasing really speaks volumes about the perception, at least among the opposition and protesters, that fundamental democratic rights are genuinely under threat.
So what about the Election Commission of India? Historically, it's had this reputation, almost a gold standard, for independence. How have they responded? Because their integrity is definitely being questioned here.
Well, their response has been interesting. They called Gandhi's claims misleading, but, and this is quite telling, they didn't really systematically respond to the specific points he raised. Instead, their main response was to ask him to submit affidavits, which, focuses everything on procedure, on paperwork.
Rather than tackling the substance of the allegations head on.
Precisely. And this really highlights a critical paradox, I think. Just because something follows the letter of the law, just because it's lawful, that doesn't automatically make it trustworthy in the eyes of the public.
Right. The argument isn't just about rules being followed. It's about whether the whole process feels transparent and fair.
Exactly. And civil society groups, they've flagged similar issues before, haven't they? Things like alleged voter suppression in tribal areas or names being deleted in Muslim-majority areas. It paints a picture of, well, maybe a shadow ledger that sometimes doesn't quite match the official records, especially when you hear the Election Commission told the Supreme Court it wasn't required to publish reasons for excluding names from Bihar's draft list. That doesn't exactly build confidence.
So when Gandhi makes these demands, like machine-readable voter rolls, clarity on how Form 6 is used for registration and deletion, public release of CCTV footage from polling booths, these seem procedural, But they cut right to the core issue, don't they? It's all about rebuilding that trust.
Absolutely. And I think what this tells us about democracy today, perhaps more broadly, is that the challenge isn't always, some overt, blatant theft of power. Often it's more insidious. It's a gradual erosion of clarity, of transparency, and ultimately of trust. When public officials, for whatever reason, can't or perhaps won't explain complex processes in simple, understandable language, well, trust just corrodes. It's almost inevitable.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We're moving from the ballot box to the police station. We're going to delve into some, frankly, quite sobering findings from that report we mentioned, the Status of Policing in India Report 2025, SPIR 2025. Just to recap, this involves surveying over 8,200 police personnel across 16 states and one union territory, plus interviews with judges, lawyers, doctors. It's comprehensive, and it gives us this rare kind of unfiltered glimpse into the inner workings and maybe more importantly, the attitudes within India's policing system.
Yes. And one of the most striking things that emerges right away is this stark contrast. The gap between what the law mandates, the official procedures, and the perceived realities, the actual practices on the ground. The report specifically tried to understand the justifications police themselves might offer and the prevalence of things like torture and high-handedness within the force.
Right. Let's start with police perceptions about crime itself and the methods they use. It might surprise you, actually, what they report making most arrests for. It's often minor offenses, things like theft, extortion, even just loitering or public nuisance offenses, not necessarily the major violent crimes you might assume dominate their workload.
Which immediately makes you think about proportionality, doesn't it? Where are police resources actually being focused? And related to that, the report found that more than 1 in 3 police personnel believe that preventive arrests arresting someone before they commit a crime should be done routinely. And in some states, like Rajasthan, it's even more stark. Over 3/4 there believe indefinite detention by special squads is, and this is a quote, very useful for reducing crime.
Wow. That suggests a really strong lean towards preemptive power, doesn't it? Often unchecked by the usual legal processes.
It certainly points that way.
And here's where the findings get, well, deeply unsettling. The report uncovered significant support among police personnel for mob violence. Almost half of the respondents justified mob violence in certain cases like sexual harassment, child kidnapping, even petty theft. But listen to this, in the state of Gujarat, over half of the police personnel surveyed felt that mob violence was completely justified, specifically in cases of cow slaughter.
Completely justified. And if you place that finding in the broader context, these perceptions align almost chillingly with actual incidents of mob lynchings we've seen reported, particularly in states that have enacted very harsh laws against cow slaughter. It's profoundly alarming, isn't it, that police who are supposed to uphold the law express such high levels of support for what is essentially extra-legal justice.
It really is.
And the report also details this worrying trend. Over half of police personnel believe that using tough methods is important. Why? To instill fear in the public. So fear seems prioritized over, say, ensuring due process or building community trust.
The report also dug into police perceptions of criminality across different communities. This is also quite revealing. While, rich and powerful people were seen by about 22% of respondents as being naturally prone to crime, Muslims came in second at 18%. And perhaps most concerning on this point, the report found that Hindi police personnel were statistically more likely than others to believe that Muslims were naturally inclined towards committing crimes.
And you see similar biases reflected against other marginalized groups too. Dalits, Adivasis, indigenous communities, migrants, even sex workers were mentioned.
So these aren't just abstract attitudes, right? They inevitably shape policing practices on the ground.
Absolutely. And look at how this plays out in their views on the justice system itself. The report found 38% of police actually prefer just giving out minor punishments for minor offenses themselves instead of going through a formal legal trial.
Kind of bypassing the courts.
Exactly. And even more troubling, over 1 in 5, 22% of police personnel surveyed believe that killing dangerous criminals in illicit encounters is actually better than a legal trial. Their justification. It's for the greater good of society. This indicates a really strong preference for summary justice, completely sidestepping fundamental due process rights.
Okay, let's turn to the safeguards then. The law in India mandates very strict procedures around arrest. Things like informing the person of their rights, properly completing an arrest memo, allowing access to lawyers, allowing access to doctors. But the SPIR report found that overall, only 41% of police said these crucial procedures were always followed.
Only 41% always. And in some places, it's much worse. In Karnataka, for instance, that figure drops to just 13%. 13% saying procedures are always followed.
13%? That's incredibly low.
It is. And significantly, the report notes that IPS officers, these are the higher-ranking Indian Police Service officers, they were the least likely group to believe it's always even feasible to follow some key rules, like producing someone before a magistrate within 24 hours or taking them for a mandatory medical examination after arrest. The people in charge are least convinced it's always possible.
So if the leadership doubts the feasibility,
It sends a message down the ranks, doesn't it? And this isn't just police perception. Lawyers and judges interviewed for the same report, they corroborated these findings. They reported that police often don't facilitate access to lawyers for arrested individuals. They describe situations, quite shocking ones really, where arrested persons are literally just shown to magistrates through windows, not brought before them properly.
certainly windows.
Yes, and they even mention cases where post-mortem reports in cases of death in custody appeared to be manipulated. The lawyers were very clear. The absence of a lawyer at the early stages gives police, quote, a free hand.
Which leads to the inevitable, deeply concerning question. If these basic, legally mandated safeguards are being routinely bypassed, what is happening to people while they're in police custody?
And the report is blunt about the answer. What happens, it suggests, is often torture.
It actually lists common methods reported. Beatings with lathis, canes, electric shocks, forms of sexual violence, psychological tactics too, like threatening family members. The report's conclusion on this is stark. It states explicitly that torture is, quote, systemic and rooted in policing practices. Not isolated incidents, but systemic.
Systemic, and what's perhaps truly astonishing, or maybe deeply disturbing, is that a significant number of police personnel themselves actually justify using what are euphemistically called third-degree methods, which essentially means coercive interrogation, often involving brutal force. 30%, nearly a third, justify using these methods for serious criminal cases.
Okay, serious cases, maybe some would expect that, though it's illegal.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop there, does it?
No, it doesn't. 9% said they'd justify using third-degree methods even for petty offenses, minor crimes. And perhaps even more concerning, 11% believe that hitting or slapping the family members of someone who's absconded someone they're looking for is absolutely justified.
Hitting family members.
Yes. And 9% justify using third-degree methods against a witness who they deem uncooperative. So this suggests a really broad, seemingly deeply ingrained acceptance of violence within the policing culture. Violence not just against accused individuals, but even against their families or against witnesses.
Given all of this picture of systemic issues, biased perceptions, justification of violence, let's talk about accountability. What mechanisms exist and how effective are they? You might logically expect police to, well, maybe not welcome oversight, but at least accept it as necessary. But the report paints a very different picture.
It really does. Almost 70% of police personnel surveyed agreed with the statement that police should be allowed to arrest and detain suspects without any court investigation.
Without court investigation, that's fundamentally challenging the idea of judicial oversight.
It absolutely is. It suggests a profound disregard for that core principle of checks and balances, which is, a cornerstone of democratic governance. And look at how they view complaints from the public. When asked about public complaints against the police, a staggering 3/4 of police personnel believed these complaints were either false and frivolous or politically motivated.
So dismissing the vast majority of citizen complaints out of hand.
Essentially, yes. And compounding that, half of the police actually felt it was easy for the public to file complaints against them, which directly contradicts a lot of documentation from civil society groups and human rights organizations who report that filing complaints against police in India is often incredibly difficult and sometimes dangerous.
There's another really interesting insight in the report regarding internal accountability, isn't there? About a specific law against torture.
Yes, that's right. While a clear majority, 72% of police personnel overall, believe that India needs a separate, specific law against torture, it was again the IPS officers, those higher-ranking officials, who were least likely to support a key provision: mandatory reporting of torture witnessed or known about by their colleagues.
So the leadership is less keen on enforcing internal reporting of abuse by fellow officers.
It certainly points towards a resistance to robust internal accountability mechanisms, doesn't it?
And this lack of accountability seems starkly reflected in the data on custodial deaths. You mentioned discrepancies earlier.
Yes, the discrepancies are significant and deeply troubling. You have official sources like the National Crime Records Bureau, NCRB, and then you have human rights organizations like the National Campaign Against Torture, NCIT. Their numbers often differ wildly. Take 2020, for example. NCIT reported 111 deaths in custody that year and alleged that nearly half, 46%, were due to torture. The official NCRB figures for the same year reported only 76 deaths and attributed just one single death to physical assault by police.
One death attributed to assault versus NCTAT alleging torture in almost half of their documented cases. That's not just a statistical difference.
No, it's a chasm. It points to a profound breakdown in how these critical, fatal events are being recorded, investigated, and reported officially. It raises massive questions about transparency and honesty.
And there's that absolutely chilling statistic about when these deaths occur.
Yes. The report highlights that a majority of deaths recorded in police custody, 61% across India, between 2018 and 2022, happened within 24 hours of the person being arrested.
Within the first 24 hours.
And in the state of Gujarat, that figure was even higher. A staggering 96% of custodial deaths occurred within that first 24-hour window.
Before they're even produced before a judicial magistrate, which is supposed to happen within 24 hours.
Exactly. Before that first crucial judicial check is supposed to take place. This timing is incredibly significant.
It really makes you question the effectiveness of the legally mandated judicial inquiries that are supposed to happen in every single case of custodial death.
Well, the data suggests they're often not happening or are ineffective when they do. In 2022, for example, only 35% of reported custodial deaths actually saw a judicial inquiry ordered despite the mandate. And even when inquiries happen, look at the outcomes. Between 2018 and 2022, criminal cases were registered against police personnel in only 10% of reported custodial deaths.
Only 10% led to a case being filed.
And the conviction rate in those cases, 0%.
Zero.
0% conviction rate between 2018 and 2022 in cases registered against police for custodial deaths. And even the National Human Rights Commission of India, the NHRC, which is the country's apex human rights body. Lawyers and judges interviewed for the SPR report described it essentially as a paper tiger. They said it primarily just awards monetary compensation to families, but rarely pushes for real punitive action against the police officers implicated.
So, systemic impediments to justice seem to exist at multiple levels.
That's certainly the picture that emerges from the report. A profound breakdown in the accountability chain, from internal reporting right through the judicial process.
So, wow. We've covered a lot today, from those really contentious claims around India's voter rolls and the questions about electoral integrity, to these, frankly, startling and deeply concerning realities of policing practices, perceptions, and the apparent lack of accountability detailed in the CI report. What really stands out, I think, across both these areas is the profound impact all of this has on trust. Trust in core institutions, trust in due process, trust in the very fabric of democratic accountability itself.
Absolutely. Which leads us, I suppose, to a crucial question for you, our listener, to think about. In a world absolutely awash with information, yet where clarity often feels frustratingly elusive, how do you go about discerning the truth? Especially when the very institutions that are meant to uphold that truth, ensure fairness, ensure transparency, when they themselves are facing such fundamental questions about their own impartiality and their own practices.
It's a tough question, but we hope this deep dive today gives you some valuable context and information to help you continue seeking those answers.